work in sales, Josh. So what kind of negotiation? What is your negotiation tactic? Like, how do you negotiate on property?
It's quite interesting because the job that I'm in now is selling into hospitals. So whereas in my previous sales role was selling into discount retail wholesale. So it's going, obviously, I feel like the same principles apply, but just different customer base. But what I do at the moment is, especially with the Victorian public hospitals, unfortunately, a lot of the products like your consumables and your high volume products, everything is priced. Unfortunately, because I feel, which is disappointing in a sense, because I feel like anyone can come in and go, I've got this cheap product for you. So I always try to think a little bit outside the box. Sometimes it doesn't win me the business, but sometimes it does, and that's fine. But I always try to think first before I always have price as a last resort option. I always go in there first, finding out what the problem is, what the solution is. What the problem is, and then I try and work with them a solution, and then we can negotiate on the price once I've built the relationship and built their trust, and they can see that I'm there for the right reasons. Whereas if I go in there just going, buy this, I can do it for this price, I feel like it's just a transaction. There's no, it's not personalized. And I want to present myself and also build a reputation for, obviously the company that I'm working for at the moment. I want to be able to, that like it is a personalized service that they're going to get, because, ongoing, not just to buy something off me. And I always go in thinking, I don't want to go in thinking, how much am I going to get out of this customer today? I always go in, well, how can I help them? And we half the time, sometimes I'll have appointments and we don't start talking about business until the very end, or we might not even talk about it at all, because I know that I'm building the foundation, because there's plenty of time for price and all the nitty gritty stuff. So I feel like I always start with building that foundation first and the relationship, and then we focus on the negotiations, because then once they've got that, once they get to know you, they trust you. And, so you might still get stuff over the line if it is a bit more expensive, because they'll be able to see the value in you as a person and the product and the business that you're bringing to them. So I hope that sort of answers your question, but I sort of just do it in a bit of a different way, and touch wood, it's helped me achieve really good results in my job. So.
And how does that help you on the property side of things, Josh? Are you finding that that's something that you do now when you're looking to purchase a property? You will really strengthen relationships with agents and PMs? Like, do you use that in the investing side, that skill?
I actually have, my most recent purchase was pretty much exactly that. So it was, and I'm sure we'll unpack it a bit later, but yeah, it was just that.
I may have jumped ahead a bit here.
No,
that's all right. We do that. I've got a great relationship with my property manager in Cairns, and she has been up there, I think she said like 20 years or something. So she helped me. But then the agent selling the house was actually very like-minded like myself. It was just like, look, I was really upfront. I said, look, this is my intention. This is my budget. I can, it's offers over X, Y, Z. I know it's quite close to that number, but I'm willing to do this, and this if it helped. Tell me a little bit about the situation with the vendor. Like I'm happy to work with them to help. Like if I can't, I might not be able to come in with the highest price sort of thing. Like we had a bit of a chat on the phone, and I was like, this could go either way here. But I just said, I was really upfront about my intentions, and I said, look, he's like, oh, we want to obviously get the highest price. I said, look, 100% agree with that, but this is my budget. If you could please take it to them, but I'm happy to work on other things if it meant that if it can help them. So I sort of was trying not to just focus on the price again, because it's, whilst it is a factor, it's not the only factor, if that makes sense. Did financing the final loan require it to be rented at a certain amount to get approval? Great question.
So did financing the final loan require it to be rented a certain amount?
Yeah. So did it need to be at $400 a week, or what was the minimum it could? Yeah. Did it need that?
Did you need to get a rental letter?
I did. So I provided them with the initial one of $435, and that's what got the total amount needed. But I didn't have to provide. We're not letting you the key or until we see a lease agreement or anything like that. So I think that was the minimum, and I had to get, and they lent that amount to me. But luckily, we ended up renting it for more. But
the
The reason a bank will take that is because if absolute worst case scenario, if they needed to take possession of the property, they would be able to. That's what the market would generally pay for that. So they'd be able to sell it with that sort of thing. So that's why they.
Well, that's right, and I think that's what. Yeah, because I had a letter signed from a property manager who I was with, and and they just said based on these plans, the location. I asked them to be quite conservative because I didn't want to shoot myself in the foot. I just was trying to be a little bit cautious on that. That way, worst case, if it was a little bit extra or whatever, then I'm winning, sort of thing. So, but yeah, it all got approved based on $435 a week, which just amazing though, that extra, the saving of the $50K, but then an extra $50 a week, $45 a week in rent. It's a huge difference to making me service that, and also probably because it was a 4-bedroom, they saw better resale value as well.
Absolutely. But benefit of hindsight, and with the bits of issues that you had around financing, would you still have asked them to be conservative, or would you have been like, make it as high as possible?
Now, with probably a little bit more knowledge just about it all, I'd probably be like, now I'm talking to a few property managers, I'm like, hey, can you be a bit more like on the higher side? Like, but
generous, but still realistic.
Exactly, because I feel like you don't want to, it's good to be conservative to a degree because in case things change, it's good to have a buffer, as you say. So, yeah.
Yeah. What lesson did you learn going from 2 into 3? Like what did you, or your second property into your third? What sort of research did you start putting into your third property? Let's kind of leapfrog that.
Yeah. So the biggest things I learned from number 2 to 3 was doing a bit more due diligence in regards to council stuff like building permits and all that kind of stuff. And just being a bit more business minded rather than emotion. And again, number 2 was a little bit less emotion than number 1, but probably a little bit too much as well, and then number 3 was more right. The numbers stack up. It's the house, I can add value to it. Like, it's not the most prettiest house. Like, it's nice, but like there's stuff I can do to it. And I was thinking more, okay, how is this going to make me money? I was very okay, I can do X, Y, Z. I did a bit more due diligence in terms of like previous sales. Okay, well, that one sold for 450 and it was a 322. Mine's a 422 and I'm paying less. And there's also ways I can add value to it down the track. It's in a good street, it's on a bigger block. I started to be a lot more, doing a lot more due diligence in that sense because of the lessons that I learned from number 1 and also number 2. Number 2 had, benefits as well, but then I was like, how can I perfect, get better at this? And there's some things that for number 4 I'll do better as well. So I feel like it's just a learning game as you go, of course. So
for anyone that's just at the start of the journey now and listening to what Josh is saying, for me, one of the biggest takeaways that I really get from that is do everything you can to make number 1 as good as possible. But at the end of the day, if it's not perfect, that's okay. As long as you take those lessons from going at the end of it, and this is actually a really good thing to do. It's what I always used to do is I'd sit down and we'd literally pull the project apart and go, what did we do really well? And we want to take to the next one. And what did we stuff up that we're going to go, we never want to take that to the next one with us. That can just stay at that project. And it sounds like you do that perfectly, Josh. And now you've got to buying number 3. And by the sounds of it, you've firmly got that investor hat on. The emotional side of it's out the window. It's like, how can I add value? What do the numbers look like? What am I really looking for? But if you hadn't have done number 1, even though it might not have been perfect, you wouldn't have got to that level of confidence.
No, and I think especially because number 3 was very different for me. I don't know if I told you, Todd, but because it was interstate. So I'm in Victoria. So the first 2 were in regional Victoria. So then going interstate was way out of my comfort zone. And there was a little bit of fear there, but it pushed me. I was like, okay, Josh, this is really different for you. I just like, okay, there was no emotion there. I can't see it. There's just it was just like you said, investor hat on. And I made sure I got down to the street, which I know is a huge thing as well. I did a lot more research on owner occupiers versus, tenancy. housing commission, just all those things that I didn't know for number one. And I'm very lucky that I haven't been caught out in bad situations yet with those kinds of things. And so I've been, so I was like, I've learnt my lesson. And I just being a bit more nitty gritty, but also having a really good property manager help me as well. Be like, okay, this is what you also need to do. Call council, ask for this, ask for that, and having a good solicitor who was based in the state that had been doing it for many years as well, and guiding me and saying, Josh, you need to make sure you check this, and this before you put an offer in. Check X, Y, Z, all these things. And it's now I just write all this stuff down. So when I go to buy number 4, I can be like, all right, bam, 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 tick off the list, make it a quick, smoother process as well.
How did you structure your purchase in terms of buying in your name or under trusts to ensure you don't max out with serviceability in the eyes of the banks?
So I have a combination of trusts and my personal name. And I guess in terms of servicing, I've just been very strict on what yields what I'm willing to accept. And I'll only buy cash flow positive. I'm also, I don't want to sound cocky again, but I love negotiating with the bank to get a cheaper interest rate.
That's not cocky though. That's smart, because tell us about your strategy around that. We'll get to this next question.
Yeah, but so that's what. So I've got a combination of my personal name. So I've tried to keep my personal debt as low as possible and start buying in trusts to. Because I want the bank to sort of look at me as more of, as a serious investor, not just Josh. I want them to start going, because obviously, as lenders, we don't want to take on too much risk. So to me, it was also about eliminating risk and also protecting myself for my future and, all those kinds of things. So now moving forward, my personal debt is as minimal as possible, and then everything will be under a trust and proprietary limited. So
tell us about number 4, but how it's going to get you to number 5.
What about number 15?
So going down that road again of how I was saying for number 3 of the trying to find something that's a good egg, but I can, a couple of years, if you get in between tenancies, where I can have a bit of cash behind me once it's, and start doing some adding value to it. I'm trying to be a bit more, like, I've had a lot of luck with buying and building, but I think that whole adding value thing, I think, is a really good strategy that for my third one, it's worked really well. I've only had it 3 months and it's gone up quite significantly, but I also bought it way under market value. So it's, 2 things were going for me there. So I think number 4, again, same thing. I'm going to try and hit the ground running and build those relationships. And it might take me a little bit longer, but it will happen, because you need, and then once I've got those relationships, I'll then start the hunt for to find that one that meets, because I'm strict on my price. I've got my yields I want.
What's your price and what's your yield? I think I know where you're looking, but what's your price and yield? I'm interested.
Ideally, no less than sort of 6.8%, which is hard, but it's doable. If I can get more, then that's icing on the cake. But
you're talking 6.8 as a straight rental? You're not going like rooming house or granny or anything like that?
That's just straight rental. And then, but if I'm trying to look for properties that I can, look at how I can maybe develop that down the track. Like, for example, adding a granny flat, like having side access on it, for example. So that's what number 3 was. It's got potential down the track. It's a huge block. And for side access, I can't remember the type of zoning that it is, but the council said that it can be subdivided. So
we're talking R20. Is it? Are we over that neck of the woods, or
something like that? I can't remember. I'm hopeless with all that stuff, but like they said it's a really good. So I was like, okay, that's how long term, when I've got a bit more capital behind me, I can start increasing those yields. But to begin with, they're my basic numbers, and they've touched wood. They've helped me continue to borrow because I can still handle these rate rises and still be cash flow positive, which to me, I feel like that's a win-win. My price, I'm trying to keep it sub 400 if I can. Ideally lower would be good. But it's hard. Just like there's heaps on there for 360, 370, but they're going for a lot more. That's the only thing.
You got to be careful. If you're looking where I think you may be looking, you got to be a little bit careful in terms of I'd probably, if you're going to, I'd fly over there if you can, if you haven't already, just understand, because that's what Joe was on the weekend.
Can you give us the state just so everyone's not going, did I miss that part, and rewinding it?
Sure.
WA.
WA. So,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I was hoping to do Queensland again, but where I bought, there's definitely, I know a lot of other people are buying there at the moment, but for me and my goals, I think it's just a little bit out of what I'm wanting. I think it's a little bit hot for me personally. I know not for everyone else. Whereas I think WA, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I've connected with some really good people already over there. So yeah.
Okay, and pushing a little bit more on the how's 4 going to get you to 5? Is that like you're going to add some value and then do like an equity release, or what are you thinking, or is it more so relying on picking the market well enough to do that lift for you?
Probably a little bit of both, but mostly relying on adding value. So I've found a couple that look like they're obviously pending building and pest, but look really good in good locations. And then, the kitchen upgrades, new carpet, just stuff like that, new bathroom upgrades, stuff, but it's completely functional, safe, and, someone would actually want to live in it. But there's stuff that you could significantly, like when you're looking at rentals, I'm like, okay, that one's renovated and it's getting, an extra $120 a week rent. So just as an example. And so I'm like, okay, over time, hopefully there's a little bit of equity there. If not, I've got that option to manufacture that growth as well. And, so yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking for number 5, in conjunction with my other properties as well, because one of them is on P&I as well. So, which that works for me. And it's still cash flow positive. So I was like, well, to me, that makes sense. And I can then release equity from that. Like I try to keep multiple options at one stage. So to accommodate for things changing, if that makes sense, to help me get to that next level.
Yeah, perfect sense.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, what can somebody who's just starting learn from your type of investing? Like if you could impart some knowledge, what would that knowledge be?
I think just if even if you're not my age, I think you just gotta just building relationships and just trusting your gut sometimes to take risks. And I think I always say to myself what the worst case scenario is, and 99% of the time it's not that bad, and it really never ends up happening. And the benefits for me just outweigh the risk and the worst case scenarios, like always. I just keep telling myself that, and just eventually I believe it. So yeah, if it's one thing I could do, just do it. Honestly, and do what's best for yourself, obviously. But if you're wanting to do it and your fears, you just got to say to yourself, well, what if it goes right, rather than what if not? And I think if you can try and talk yourself like that in a good way, I think you'll be fine.